Live from the Web3.com Ventures offices, it's The Round Trip with John Sienna. I'm a VC and former founder investing in the edge of crypto, AI, and frontier tech. Here's what we're tracking this week on The Round Trip: chaos in crypto, the rise of AI, and macro on the move. From Silicon Valley to Singapore, we're mapping momentum, questioning the consensus, and surfacing the signal. Let's dive in with our co-host. Joining us from the intersection of alpha and analysis, she's the degen of DeFi, fluent in FUD, and deep in the charts. She's worked behind the scenes at PANews, helping top projects translate tech into traction. From Taipei to your timeline, it's Cassidy Wong. Together, we're leveraged up and we're making the round trip.
Hi, John.
Hey.
Yeah, so this week definitely felt like a turning point. Bitcoin smashed through 111,000. It's sending shockwaves to all the markets. Meanwhile, the US dollar, it's showing real signs of stress. So this, why, what does this mean? Well, Moody just downgraded the US sovereign debt, which means America, it now has lost their AAA rating, AAA rating across all the major agencies. It's also projected that the interest payments alone on America's debt, it will consume up to 30% of the federal revenue by 2035. It's up around 18.4% from the current rate.
Yeah, I think it's pretty wild. I remember the first big debt crisis right around when I turned 18, and that's when the US lost its first AAA rating. And yeah, we haven't made any changes. We're still, issuing a lot of debt and it's not going down. And yeah, I think a big sign that the market isn't happy is that the Treasury auctions on Wednesday were pretty weak, and the 20-year note broke above 5% for the first time since 2007. And I've been looking at mortgages and mortgage rates, they're up 7%. So I really don't know how the common person in America is, coping with this. I think a lot of them are locked into their low rates, so people won't be moving for a long time. And it kind of makes me a little sad because last time Trump was in office, he wanted to issue 50 or 100-year notes at 1 or 2% interest. And yeah, now we're at 5, so that's costing America a lot more, and it's not getting any better.
That's crazy. Living expense in America was already high. So now with the rising mortgage rate, it will be, it's not, I can't imagine it. And there is also one big, beautiful bill passed by the House of Representatives on Thursday. The bill includes massive tax cuts, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and other tax deductions as well. This tax cut, it could balloon deficit further, raising long-term sustainability concerns.
Yeah, well, it does sound nice, especially if you work in the service industry where you're getting no tax on your tips and no tax on overtimes if you're a hardworking American. It's great, but who's really paying for this? It's our kids and our grandchildren. But that's the bad thing about American politics is you go out and you have to make all these promises to win votes. And this won a lot of votes in states like Nevada where they have huge service industries, but it's costing America a lot. And this bill is estimated to reduce government revenue by 3 trillion over the next decade. So, yeah, where are they getting, all the money to fill the hole?
Well, that's a huge hole to fill. Well, we have to be clear. US has a huge debt problem, and it doesn't seem like tariffs or Elon's Doge are doing enough to fix it. So far, the other Doge, the Department Government of Efficiency, they have reported 170 billion in savings, but it's definitely not enough to fill up that big hole. The federal deficit continues to grow, highlighting the pressing need for real physical reform.
Yeah, 170 billion is what they got to so far, and it's not 3.8 trillion. So there's a long way to go, and I think Elon, yeah, kind of has to take a step back because he could only work 120 days for the government a year, and he's got a few companies to run. So there's definitely a need for real fiscal reform. And it reminds me when I first got into Bitcoin, it was around 2013, the Cyprus banking crisis was happening. Greece was going through an austerity shock. It's kind of sounds like what America needs to go through today because Greece was at like 160% debt to GDP. America's at 124% today. Not that far off considering how fast they're just, printing and borrowing and have to wonder like, I thought Doge was going to be this kind of austerity measures. I think, Trump with like, because one of the biggest parts of the government's deficit or like a contributor to it is rising healthcare costs for, in Social Security. So the fact that he's negotiated this deal to, make sure America gets the best rates for drugs is, I think, a huge play into reducing the deficit, but it's something that we won't know for a few years. Yeah, I think, yeah, all this news, it contributed to the US dollar index going below 100 for the first time since 2022. And yeah, the markets aren't happy about that.
Well, I do feel like the era of the strong dollar is it might finally fading. There's already talk that G7 leaders they will make it a headline topic at their upcoming summit in Canada this June. I guess that's how big the shift is. Meanwhile, over at the Fed, I think the rates are still on pause. But our friend Jerome Powell, he actually dropped a hint. The inflation will be cooling. The markets is now pricing in rate cuts before the end of the year.
All these things they play into each other, and yeah, the G7 leaders, they also have to deal with their own fiscal crisis because, frankly, no one runs a surplus, and they all need a print, and they kind of need a print in unison, so that way, like one currency doesn't go up too much against the other, and it helps them with trade balances. So we're just in a world of printing, and I think that's yeah, it's going to be the course for quite a while. It seems like it's the only way, the governments know how to solve problems is by printing because frankly, it's the easiest. So we're here. We have this downgraded debt, ballooning deficits, weak treasury auctions, and the dollar just slipped below 100 for the first time in a few years. And you have to wonder, what does this mean?
Well, the dollar narrative is definitely changing. So with the downgraded debt, and we're looking at maybe a different. So I think the Fed it's actually kind of boxing right now. Realistically speaking, they've got two levers left to keep yields from spinning out. I think number one, they can fire up the money printer, start buying the bonds themselves, but the risk kicking inflation right back into gear. Number two, they can find someone else to be the buyer of last resort for U.S. Treasuries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We might see like AI bring a little deflation, especially as well with like robotics bringing in automation. But yeah, they really only have these two levers that they hold, and the rest are kind of market forces. But it's kind of interesting. At the same time, I don't think it's a coincidence. They have this third option that's trying to go through Senate right now, and it's called the Genius Act. I think they think they're geniuses because, yeah, they're trying to push all this debt and on holders of stable coins. So, yeah, it's a federal stablecoin bill, and it's aimed to create a legal framework for a regulated dollar-backed crypto and the Treasury is backing it as part of the architecture. And yeah, there's a controversial bit. So does this incentivize stablecoin issuers to hold long-term U.S. debt and turning them into a new class of sovereign bondholders, just as China and other nations are selling their U.S. treasuries to kind of weaken the U.S.'s influence?
Well, this isn't just about regulating digital dollars. It's about plugging the trillion-dollar treasury buyer gap left by foreign governments. It's not just governments making moves, but the private sector. It's not sitting still either. If you may know from news from the one of the headline news this week, J.P. Morgan, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Citigroup, all these banking giants, they're cooking up a joint stablecoin initiative. It's crazy. Like when you see all these big corporations doing things like this, um, it shows that Wall Street is now officially stepping into the stablecoin arena.
I mean, these banks, they work with the Fed, so this is something the Fed wants, and I mean, it's great for them. They're gonna get yield from dollar accounts. Like, it's a huge win. So, I mean, stable coins are over, I think, like 300 and something billion already. It's huge. Like, you look at the top five, and you have USDT and USDC already there. So we're talking about a regulated, liquid, Wall Street backed dollar. And I think it's also gonna, help them with like, just sending money like cross borders or even from account to account. It's a whole lot easier than doing ACHs and wires today. And, it's gonna be a giant vacuum cleaner for US debt.
Well, definitely. Coming from Asia, I did have to do a lot of ACH wires, and it was pain in the ass. But now we're talking about digital dollars, with bankers' logo stamped on top. So this will definitely be something interesting. What will be the implications? What do you think about this?
So I think this isn't just like a technical fix. It's more of a geopolitical workaround, and it's using crypto infrastructure to shore up dollar demand while backfilling these treasury auctions that, sovereigns don't want to buy anymore. It's a global race. I mean, Hong Kong just gave the green light for its own stablecoin legislation. So I think we're going to see more and more, economies and nations issue their own kind of debt. I think that's like part of the MICA framework is to do something like this, but I think they still have a long way to go. But in short, stablecoins are becoming monetary infrastructure, and whoever writes the rules shapes the flows.
So yeah, so while the Genius Act drags into the U.S. Senate, Wall Street also and J.P. Morgan, they are also experimenting with stablecoin. Hong Kong is also sprinting ahead. So, well, I think this could be the next go-to stablecoin gateway for the entire Asia Pacific region.
Yeah, Washington's quietly leaning in to patch the fiscal cracks with stablecoins, and the market's already made up its mind. The capital's rotating out of fiat into scarcity and into Bitcoin. So, yeah, I think we should talk about that because when Bitcoin broke 111,000, that was big. I mean, it's an all-time high. Uh, but it's not just like Bitcoin's going to a new high. I think it's a lot about the dollar weakening.
Well, yeah, I don't think that's the well. Definitely broke all-time high, but I don't think that's the end of it. We're definitely gonna see some more heights, maybe double tops coming soon. But what does this mean? It's not just a price pump. It's sending a global signal. While the dollar is pretty soft right now, gold's ripping. Digital hard assets like Bitcoin, they're finally having a show for themselves, stepping into their monetary moment. So actually, this week, there were over 260 million in shorts that were liquidated over a 24-hour window. It's a proof that the market wasn't really positioned for a breakout like this, but Bitcoin dominance is definitely rising. Institutionals, they, for example, like MicroStrategy, they're now worth over 63 billion, with more than 23 billion in unrealized gains from this Bitcoin hike.
Yeah, and Blackstone just scooped up a piece of BlackRock's spot Bitcoin ETF. I mean, Blackstone is one of the biggest asset managers in the world. I think they have something like $1.3 trillion of assets under management. So they just dipped their toe in. It's like a small buy for them that they just announced. But I mean, this is the first domino to fall for them. And the more they buy, the more the price goes up. So I think we're going to see a liquidity crunch when it comes to Bitcoin. I know the Japanese MicroStrategy, MetaPlanet, they've reached an insane number of Bitcoin themselves. I think it's like in the, yeah, a couple $100 million worth now. So they're not far behind. I mean, they are far behind, but they MicroStrategy, but they're moving pretty fast in terms of how fast. I think they're like the book to net asset value is a lot higher than MicroStrategy's, which illustrates like the Japanese buyers are just going crazy over this.
Well,
Um,
yeah, definitely. Last time I checked, they had 5,555 Bitcoin. It's the Japanese saying of the go 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 go. So yeah, well, it's really clear that with the Blackstone's purchase, the traditional finance, they're not just watching Bitcoins anymore. They're embracing Bitcoin.
yeah, it's also not, again, Bitcoin pumping. It's a macro referendum on fiat credibility, on debt, and on liquidity. And Bitcoin's winning the vote. It's not a risk asset anymore, like just a risk asset. And because, like, yeah, interest rates aren't zero anymore. So it's not a zero interest rate phenomenon. And at the same time, over this past month, we've seen ETH up 80% since its April lows, but it's still down year to date. And I think it's a perfect example of a cautious re-entry. And at the same time, Ethereum staking yield is hovering around 3.25%, which is pretty close to real world yields for bonds. So it's a narrative few, I think, are noticing.
Yeah. I think if it's in bank, if you put in savings accounts, it's around 2 point something percent. So it's very real, the yields right now. Can we talk about my favorite altcoins? Right now, let's take XRP for example. XRP, they gained institutional validation via CME futures recently, but actually the price dipped. So it's showing us that the narrative isn't everything anymore. The narrative and the price of the coin, it's not in a direct relationship. But well, I also heard about the big news and Avalanche. Have you heard the news this week?
Yeah, I saw Avalanche. They had their conference and they announced like a few partnerships, like Maple Story, Pixelmon, Inversion Capital by Santee, and even FIFA. So that one was pretty huge. Waiting to see what they do with it because I play some FIFA sometimes. Uh, but I can't believe you just said XRP is one of your favorite cryptos. Not gonna let that go. But back to Avex, yeah, they're gaining some serious real world traction, especially on like the asset tokenization side. And this isn't just, speculation anymore. It's real infrastructure. And yeah, they're building real use cases and have some serious partnerships.
Well, I think the altcoin market, they're definitely maturing. We can see a lot of the capital rotates towards real use cases, and also like the partnerships that you mentioned earlier. But another of my favorite coins, Solana, it got its moment this week too. Um, yeah, so I think Kraken also launched a tokenized stock trading on Solana. Users, they can now use fractional equity via their blockchain rails. So I think this is a huge moment for DeFi when the DeFi meets TradeFi infrastructure.
Yeah, I think this is like pretty interesting. You see like which companies go towards which chains. And yeah, I think a lot of kind of the traditional TradeFi companies, they've been avoiding Solana because it has like this, tons of meme coins, and they don't really like that. But it is where the traders are, and I think that's what Kraken sees. So they're definitely bringing like it's one of the most liquid markets. So bringing these stocks to Solana, I think, is the right bet. Um, and we'll see like which other partnerships and products each chain gets. But I think it's going to be quite selective. Where yeah, maybe Avex gets these like brands like FIFA, but Kraken gets more of these trading related products. I did notice though that like even though Solana's volume has rose, it's still a fraction of where it was. So I think it's more about like being selective and not so speculative. Yeah.
Well, earlier, I think earlier last year, we did see some price prediction for Solana going to around $500, and I'm still definitely waiting on that.
Oh, I think that's what Joe. Yeah, Joe. I forget what's his company, but yeah, he always like Solana 500 or something. And yeah, I'm also waiting for that. That that would be nice.
Yeah, but I think from all the news that we covered this week, Bitcoin's breakout to its all-time highs, and also Blackstone buying into Bitcoin ETFs, from Solana tokenizing stocks, to the Senate rewriting what a stable coin is, it's definitely showing us what the current migration is going towards too. It's not about hype anymore. Capital is definitely shifting.
What do you mean? Not about hype? Didn't you see like Hyperliquid just hit like all-time highs, like $36?
I did see that this morning. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think it is a bit about hype. Hyperliquid, Hyperliquid. Yeah, I'm missing that at the bottom of every tweet.
Do you
Uh,
still do you still have your hype coins? I don't own
uh,
it.
oh, okay. I'm staking some. Hopefully they do a second airdrop. We'll see. Uh,
Well,
capital is
will be on
definitely.
you next time.
What's that?
Dinner will be on you next time.
Okay, well, hopefully this yield is nice for the staking. Yeah, I think yeah, capital's moving and it's moving away from fiat into scarcity, into hard assets, and into hype. Crypto is the buffer when the markets shape, and it's the benchmark for risk off conviction, and maybe even the buyer of last resort. So I don't think we're early anymore. We're really on the move.
Hmm. Well, I think it's not crypto versus the system anymore. Crypto is actually the system now. So at least it's becoming the infrastructure beneath it. So whether if you're watching stablecoins absorb treasuries or altcoin evolve into platforms for real world assets, or even Bitcoin behaving like a non-sovereign reserve assets in a world full of fiscal stress. So one thing that's clear that a takeaway from this is that out season is not here just yet. It's allocation season.
I like that crypto is a system. I think it's a bit provocative. Let's see what the viewers think. But if you're still listening, thank you. I think you're already ahead of the curve and perhaps ahead of the Fed's yield curve. But thank you for joining us this week on the round trip. If you enjoyed it, subscribe, comment, and yeah, share it, please. We'll see you next week.
Bye.